The streetlights cast long shadows across the dashboard. He thought about all the years he had spent feeling abandoned, resentful, hollow, and how none of those feelings had disappeared. But they had changed shape. They weren't weights anymore. They were threads connecting him to a father he'd finally begun to understand, at home. Thomas opened a blank notebook and began to write. Not for anyone else, just for himself. But maybe someday. For someone who would want to understand him the way he had finally come to understand his dad. He wrote about regret not in dramatic strokes, but in the small things. I wish I'd asked more questions. I wish I'd paid attention when he still had the words. I wish I hadn't waited until it was almost too late. But he also wrote about forgiveness. I forgive him for not knowing how. I forgive myself for not trying harder. A week later, Arthur's health declined rapidly. The nurses told Thomas it wouldn't be long. He came every day now, reading, talking, just sitting. One afternoon, as the sun filtered through the blinds and bathed the room in gold, Arthur opened. His eyes really opened them. He looked directly at Thomas and said, "Thank you for listening." It was the clearest his voice had sounded in weeks. Thomas took his hand. "Thank you for finally speaking." Arthur gave one last, small nod, then closed his eyes again. He passed 2 days later, no drama, no final scene. Just a quiet, breathless departure in the early morning hours. Thomas was there, holding his hand. He didn't cry immediately. He just sat still, heart heavy, but whole in a way he hadn't known possible at the funeral. Thomas placed the old tape recorder next to Arthur's urn. Inside it was the original cassette, the message that had changed everything. Later, he took it back home, not because he couldn't let go, but because he knew that story still had something to say. And maybe one day someone else would need to hear it too. Asterisk life after Arthur's passing was quieter, but not in a lonely way. It was a silence that held presence, a room that echoed with memory rather than absence. Thomas resumed his daily routines, but something inside him had irrevocably shifted. The bitterness that had clung to him for decades had softened. In its place grew something else: compassion, clarity,